Personal finance expert and MeVest founder Lesley-Anne joining us on Canada Now. And Lesley-Anne, a recent article of yours in the Star is just such a fitting tribute to your grandmother, Velma Scorgi, who recently passed away at 100 years old. I'm so sorry about your loss, but what a nice job on the article as well.
Thank you. She was a huge mentor for me in many areas, but one area that is very unique for a woman who was 100 was she was one of my financial mentors. And fun fact, I used to trade stocks at the kitchen table with my grandmother when I lived with her during university. She was kind of one of those like mavens that one of the first women who worked on Bay Street as a financial analyst until she was promptly let go after telling her employer she was pregnant.
Wow.
But back then, that was pretty normal course. It would never fly today. Anyhow, when I was preparing the piece for the Star this week about some of the things that my grandmother taught me about money, they seemed extra relevant today.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you shared them. And again, what is a very fitting tribute for your grandmother. Now, some things that she taught you. First off, women are excellent investors. Research shows that women outperform men in returns.
That's right. So when women are given the opportunity to learn investing skills, so opportunity being kind of the operative word there, they tend to outperform their male counterparts. I happen to also write a book on this called Well Heeled and have plenty of research, but some of the uniqueness that makes women investors so good is they're paying extra attention to gains and losses, setting up boundaries that allow them to determine, yeah, that's enough for me, I'm out, or this looks like an opportunity to get in. So what's interesting, so my grandmother actually ran the portfolio on behalf of my grandfather and her. And that was very uncommon 50, 75 years ago. But she was the one calling the shots when it came to the purchases of stocks, bonds, and different funds. So super unique, but she was more equipped to do that analysis than my grandfather, who was very busy working. And she definitely faced discrimination along the way. Like she would show up at the investment appointments with her three young children in tow. But she worked through it and she kept going, and she did exactly what we now see in the data today. She outperformed the market.
Now, do you think that is because, like what we're talking about in women outperforming men, and you mentioned your grandmother as a fine example, that maybe it's being a parent and budgeting, understanding what a budget needs to be to keep the home running?
Yeah, so she really ran the household like a mom boss. And every time a paycheck would show up, she would allocate 20% toward their retirement nest egg without fail. And then the rest of the budget, she would allocate very carefully to the categories like the needs she had for the running of the household. So the groceries, the clothes for the three kids, even paying off that mortgage. And the cool thing I learned from my grandmother is that she always had a section of her budget for spending on things that would make the family really happy. And they could be very simple things like ice cream or a family vacation or just like bowling. Like there were so many cool things she would come up with. But I think what was really cool is I distinctly remember, would sit down at the table. And this was before she lost her eyesight. So I lived with her at university, and at that point she'd lost her eyesight. But some of the memories I had when I was very young, I remember she would sit at the table and use a checkbook register and a piece of graph paper. And she would put together a projection for what she wanted to happen in the month on the graph paper. And then she'd actually track what actually happened in the checkbook register. Nowadays, that is all like automated through tools like spreadsheets and budgeting apps that we have today. But it's kind of cool that that's what she did. And it's even relevant today.
Before we go on with the things that your grandmother taught you, may I just ask briefly here, are you doing what you're doing today because of your grandmother? Is she the biggest reason?
She is one of the biggest reasons. Yes. So one of the biggest gifts that my grandmother gave to me was confidence that women could be really great in this industry. And I think that because she was promptly like kind of booted out of the industry so early, she wanted me to at least try it out. And so I think that she gave me that confidence, especially when I lived with her in university. But even well before that, she was always talking to me about how incredible women could be with their finances. And another fun fact, how independent they could be when they knew how to run their finances.
That's right.
So she really emphasized the independence thing. And I remember when I first started dating, she would say to me, you always keep a separate bank account. You never combine all your banking. What if, what if, what if? But she was a huge inspiration for the reason that I'm doing this today. The other inspiration was my aunt on the other side of the family, who was an entrepreneur. And I saw her grow a business. So I kind of got these two powerful women, my grandmother, who was running the finances really well, like a big investor, stock confidence. And then I learned how to run a business via my aunt on the other side of the family. So what I ended up doing in my career is I combined those two incredible mentorship opportunities into what I do today, which is run a business on financial education.
Well, yeah. And I think about your daughter. I mean, your daughter's
Yes.
just a cute little baby right now, but your daughter is going to have you. Your daughter is going to have your aunt, stories of your grandmother to draw from and imagine what she's going to be, and the examples that she's going to set for other women as well. Pretty excited about that. So your grandmother providing so much support for you in so many different ways, one of which was financial. Like she helped you in paying for school, and that is something that she kind of set a trend, a trailblazer in setting a trend in investing in the next generation.
That's right. Like she was ahead of the trend. Intergenerational giving whilst living is now one of the hottest personal finance trends. People do not want to wait to give money to the next generation until they pass. What good is that? And I love one of the things that my grandmother would say to me is when she gave me some money to pay for school, which was a game changer for me because I grew up not having any money. And I was not entirely sure how I was going to pay for all of my school. So that was a game changer for me. But she would say to me, I would rather have a smile on my face seeing you walk across the stage than not being able to see that joy and possibly you not finish your school because of money. And that was huge. She actually established a fund really early, before the grandchildren were even born. She established a fund that she contributed to, and it was a fund just for future education costs for all of her grandchildren. Here's another fun fact. She actually kept that fund exclusive in her name. So my grandfather wasn't even on that account name because in the event that something went wrong between her and my grandfather, she
Right.
wanted 100% control over that gift, which is cool.
I want to give a shout out to your grandfather as well. You know,
Yes.
in men supporting women, I'm sure at the time when they were coming up and they were younger and they were building themselves financially speaking as well, that and maybe your grandmother wouldn't have had it any other way anyway, but saying, you know what, accepting you take the reins on this. Clearly, we are going to do better if you're in charge of this. So you go ahead and do that. And again, maybe Velma wouldn't have had it any other way, so he didn't have any choice. But nevertheless, I think that's great.
It was so cool. My grandfather, I think he just wanted my grandma to be happy. And she was happiest doing these financial activities and running her household. So I agree. I think my grandfather was extra cool to be totally cool with my nana, taking the reins in this department. So here's a fun little tidbit. He truly believed that if she was thriving, he would thrive as well. And I think that is extra relevant today as we look at healthy relationships and money in the mix and what is going to help the couple thrive. It's actually being aligned with your finances. And it is okay to have one partner kind of be like the in the driver's seat for certain aspects of the finances. And it works well.
I think the smartest financial decision he made was Velma should do it. Velma should take care of this.
Yeah, totally.
So that's great. So she also taught you to stay the course with your financial strategy in this ever-changing world.
Right now, I think there's so much happening in the world and it isn't all good. It's going forever. We are changed after the pandemic. We are dealing with a war at the present moment. We aren't directly, but there's global impacts of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I think back to my grandmother growing up during the Great Depression and being very present in the Second World War. And she just had this perspective that you have to move along. You have to stick with your strategy and be flexible because the world is going to change around you. And when you think of your finances, it turns out my grandma's actually 100% right. You can't just go off course every time the world shifts. You need to have a strategy, and that is exactly what will make you succeed with your finances, your relationships, your career. It's staying the course, moving along, even when times are tough.
It's amazing that she had that strategy back then. And it really, that's probably the biggest thing to take away from all of this is that strategy still applies today. It's incredible. But the biggest thing that you learned from your grandmother, don't leave your future to chance and have a plan for your money.
I think that's the zinger here. She did not let life just happen or a better future maybe happens. She didn't leave it to chance. She always had a plan. And that's the brilliant thing about our conversation today is anybody can do that right now, which is why I think that lesson is still super relevant today, extra relevant if you have been feeling kind of financially off track because the world is shifting so much. So, don't let it just happen to you. Take the reins.
Absolutely. Great advice this week from Velma Scorgi. Check out mevest.ca. Personal finance expert, MeVest founder, Hank and Dot's mom, and Velma's granddaughter, Lesley-Anne Scorgi. Hey, your grandmother, Lesley-Anne, was very special, and you reflect that. Thank you so much for sharing her with us. And, of course, thanks for joining us as always, my friend.
Thanks, Jeff.